a very warm welcome to the Wise Owl Gift of the Gab Articulations. It's a bit of a mouthful, I know. I'm Rachna Singh, editor and curator of the Wise Owl, a literary and art e-magazine. And I'm really delighted that all of you made time to attend this session despite your packed schedules and the festive season. So a big thanks to you all. As you know, this event is a part of the Wise Owl anniversary celebrations, but essentially the objective of the session is to get poets, writers, storytellers on one platform where they can perform and also interact with others. Before this, we had a poetry readings event on 19th November, which was a resounding success thanks to all the poets who attended the session. We hope to continue holding many more such events. All right, so that's enough of the preliminaries, I guess. Let's commence the session today without further ceremony. We have a great lineup of writers from across the world for today's session. I'll be inviting writers in alphabetical order of their names, right? So I would first like to invite Chitra Singh, a writer from India, to begin the session today with her creative piece on childhood. But before that, let me just introduce Chitra Singh. Chitra Singh writes stories and creative non-fiction pieces with equal panache. Chitra has a master's degree in English literature and a postgraduate degree in mass communication. She has freelanced with many English dailies and magazines, writing mostly human interest features, travelogues, and stories about forest life, which she says she greatly loves. Her forte is writing middles. She has varied interests like gardening, cooking, fine embroidery, and also dabbling in the share market. That sounds pretty interesting. Okay. So one of her favorite pastimes, she says, is regaling her grandchildren with tales of yore. She has been contributing articles and travelogues for the Wise Owl right from its inception. So Chitra, the stage is all yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Rachna. First of all, I'd like to say that it's a pleasure being with all the panelists. And it's actually the first time that I'm doing something like this. I have been on Zoom calls and things, so I may make some mistakes, and I hope all of you will bear with me.
No worries, Chitra, no worries.
Yes.
You won't be the only one making mistakes.
Okay. I'll just read my piece,
and
it goes like this. Childhood is perhaps the most fascinating chapter of our lives. I love dwelling upon it. Wordsworth's quotation, "Child is the father of man," holds true for one and all, and we are willy-nilly the products of our heredity and environment, which shapes our persona and attitudes to life. Most of all, the stamp of childhood, whether happy or stressful, drenches us in its color, and we are marked for life. There is nothing more wonderful than a secure and carefree childhood, and some of the most lively and interesting episodes of our life can emerge from that. I have tried to capture that spirit in my feature, La Dolce Vita, which brings out the wonder of childhood and its essence of adventure, playfulness, and magnanimity of spirit, and the utter delight of joie de vivre. The feature dates back to the year 1954, My father had lost his plush life in the Principality of Balrampur Raj due to the Zamindari Abolition Act of 1952. And due to lack of resources, we had to perforce live with our aunt in a small hamlet on the outskirts of Dehradun, just so we could continue with our premier education in one of the town's excellent public schools. It was truly the Dickinson best of times and the worst of times. One of the paras reads like this. We ran wild for miles in hot pursuit of each other in a game of robbers and policemen. We jumped on our bicycles and pedaled furiously to the riverfront, foraging the wild berries from the bushes that grew profusely there, feasting on the tantalizing taste in unparalleled joy. We sprinted to the railway bridge spanning the river and memorized the number of planks used to construct it. We waited breathlessly for a train to pass by because we had placed a coin on the track. Once the train passed over, the coin magically turned into a magnet to our utter delight. We looked forward to winter Sunday mornings when we could raid the pea fields where the stems were groaning under the weight of their pods. There is nothing more pleasurable than lying amongst the thick stems under an azure blue sky, plucking the peas and devouring them raw, with the imminent danger of the field owner catching us in the act and we having to flee from his ominous grasp. If that happened, we would run for our lives, leap high over the watercourse separating his field from the next one, and gleefully be out of harm's way. Oh, the list was endless in those halcyon days. One other aspect of life which fascinates me is travel. Apart from the thrill of adventure and a shift from the mundane, travel infuses one with energy and a fresh zest for life. It is both educative and infuses one with a new perspective to life. Seeing new countries, meeting new people, getting an insight into different cultures can be a very rewarding experience and can enrich our lives. True to this ideology, I try to venture forth whenever circumstances permit. One such adventure was our visit to the south of Spain, where we had the good fortune of witnessing an exquisite flamenco dance performance, without which no visit to Spain is complete. Some of the excerpts from the feature go like this. The atmosphere in the hall was electric. Cries of "Hola, hola" ricocheted round the walls and had the adrenaline pumping in one and all. It was a motley gathering of young and old, out on the town for an evening of undiluted entertainment. Earlier, after being ushered into a van, we settled down in our comfortable seats to enjoy the drive to the venue from the hotel. This encompassed weaving in and out through parts of the city where the evening lights were just beginning to beckon. Looking out of the window, we saw the avenues ablaze with psychedelic lights in all kinds of hues, blinking at us. They had bathed the evening with a lively, magical quality. The sidewalks were flowing with walkers, jostling one another and fusing one with infectious exuberance. Sevilla, the seat of the exotic flamenco dance, is a delight in the month of March. Winter has been left behind and spring is in the offing. The evening air is nippy and crisp. The sidewalks are lined with rows of small orange trees, their lush dark green branches already laden with small bright oranges shining like beacons from the green foliage. People go about their business without disturbing the fruit in any way. It certainly remains a memorable experience. So these are the two small excerpts which I've given, and I hope you all find them interesting.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Chitra. That was really beautiful. I'm sure we all remember our childhood days with great fondness. And
Yes.
it reminds me of this poem, we used to, as children, we used to recite. It was Thomas Hood's poem, which talks about childhood. It says, I remember the house where I was
When I was
born,
born.
the
Yes.
little window where the sun came peeping in at morn. I remember, I
Yes.
remember.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. I've also read that poem.
yeah. So thanks a lot, Chitra.
Yes.
Let's move on to our next writer friend then.
Let me introduce, thank you. First of all, thank you, Rachna. My name is James Roth. I'm an American. I'm an English language fellow currently in Amman, Jordan, teaching at Jordan Media Institute. Before that, I was in Zimbabwe. And I'm going to read a nonfiction piece that takes place on Gorée Island off the coast of Senegal, which is where we had a mid-year meeting back in 2020, right when COVID was getting started. Gorée Island is the westernmost point in Africa, and I think it's probably one of the main tourist destinations in Dakar. I think I said it's where most of the slaves from Western Africa were taken and then shipped to the Americas. So it's a small island, but it has a lot of ghosts on it. Okay, let me see if I can stumble through this. Tourists disembark from the ferry and are met by souvenir hawkers selling tambourines, bracelets, and hand-woven wicker baskets. A few tourists buy some bracelets. Authentic Singalese, the hawkers tell them. The tourists then follow their tour guide along through the hot sand of the beach, past a line of restaurants. The restaurants face the quay. Dakar is about 3 miles away across the blue waves. The waves rise and fall and lap at the shore. Some tourists are in the restaurants drinking cappuccinos and lattes, a morning beer or gin and tonic. The guide leads the tourists to the House of Slaves. It's made of stone and has the foreboding look of a prison. The tour guide is a proud man, robust, and has a sonorous baritone voice. He says, "Here is where the slaves were kept, on this dirt floor, brought here from West Africa. They were divided into 3 groups, a cell for each: men, women, and virgins. The French soldiers garrisoned here chose from them. Should a woman become pregnant, she was allowed to remain on the island until giving birth, or she could return with the soldier to France with their child to live as a mulatto. The Africans were fed 1 meal of corn mush a day, a cup or 2 of water. Those men and women and children who survived passed through the door of no return. See it there? They boarded ships on the quay on which you arrived and were sent off to the Americas or the Caribbean in holds which held 300 or 400 shackled Africans. The holds stunk of feces, urine, and vomit. As many as 30% of the Africans perished on the journey. Those who survived died on cotton or sugar plantations." As he lectures, a few tourists raise a phone to take a photo of the door of no return. "No photos now," he chides. "Listen." The tourists put away their phones, looking like scolded school children. The guide says, "Any gratuities are welcome." A few tourists hand him franc notes. Others take photos of the cells and the door of no return. And one group leaves the House of Slaves, brushes sweat from their foreheads, clucking their tongues as they talk about the inhumanity of it all. They wander along away from the quay on a flagstone path under the windows which are open. Curtains rustle in the soft breeze. They come to a boutique hotel. It is a small restaurant in a garden that has a blossoming baobab tree. The flowers are white. A waiter shows the tourist to a large table that has a white cloth tablecloth. On it lie shiny forks, knives, and spoons. White napkins are in rings of mahogany. The black waiter says, "The special of the day is grilled prawns sauteed in garlic and shallots, new potatoes in a coconut sauce sprinkled with chives, a salad of artichoke hearts, and fresh tomatoes pickled from our garden." The tourists talk among themselves about the door of no return. So,
Okay, thank you, James. I think
you're
we
welcome.
missed out on your introduction, right? I kind of dropped out of the call for a second, and I think your introduction was lost in that, right?
I don't know. Go ahead.
So let me
Yes,
introduce you, right? James Roth is a writer of fiction and nonfiction. His work has appeared in several magazines and journals. His first novel, The Opium Addict, is forthcoming. He likes to say he was made in Japan.
Yes.
His parents lived there during the American occupation, but he was, to his and his mother's lasting regret, born in a military hospital in the US.
That's
He's
very sad.
presently an English language fellow at the Jordan Media Institute in Amman, Jordan. So, James,
Thank you
so much for reading out that piece. It's a bit of a wake-up call, actually, for all of us, I feel, because it talks about history, it talks about the crimes perpetrated by man against his fellow beings. And unfortunately, such incidents just become a part of a lot of intellectual discussions. Isn't that right?
Very much so.
Yes.
Yes. Well, what struck me was this is a tourist destination, and the people who were talking about the history and the inhumanity of slavery were profiting from that history, which I thought was very ironic.
Yes, absolutely.
Very,
It's
very ironic.
commercialized.
Commercializing slavery is not it was very uncomfortable for me. So
sad, but yes.
Yes.
Okay, so now let's move on to Janet. I think I was in the middle of introducing Janet when my connection just went off. So let me introduce her. Janet is the author of How to Spot One of Us, poems about the Holocaust and her family, and Seduction Out of Eden, a modern reimagining, co-authored with Jocelyn Pudick. I hope I'm getting the pronunciations right. She is producing After, a documentary where poets and actors present poems about the Holocaust and examine the responsibility of art to respond to genocide. Now, that's a really great initiative, Janet. She is also a Pushcart Prize nominee, and her work appears in numerous print and online journals and anthologies. So, Janet, please go ahead. The stage is all yours. We are all waiting to listen to your piece, The Language of Loss. She doesn't seem to be able to hear me, so I'm just going to message to her. Janet, I'll ask her to rejoin.
Perhaps you could start someone else in the meantime.
Yes, I think we should start someone else. Perhaps Santosh. We can start with Santosh, right? Can you hear me, Santosh?
Yeah, I'm ready.
You can?
Very well. Yeah.
So we are going to kind of break the imagined line of alphabetical order, and we'll just get to you straight away. So Santosh is going to be reading out her humorous piece called Try Marlowe, which simply translated means give it a try. So Santosh is a poet, an essayist, a novelist, a biographer, a TEDx speaker, and has authored as many as 23 books across different genres. She is the winner of Ruel International Award for Poetry and Setu Award for her stellar contribution to world literature. She has been acclaimed for her poetic biography of Mahatma Gandhi, which is called Ballad of Bapu, Her biography on Martin Luther King Jr., Only in Darkness Can You See the Stars, has also been critically acclaimed. Her latest book is Runcible Spoons and Pea Green Boats. She pens a weekly column called Morning Meanderings in learningandcreativity.com. So, Santosh, please read out your piece.
Thank
We
you
are
so
all
much.
waiting to
Thank
hear
you.
you.
Thank you so much, Rachna. It was wonderful listening to Chitra Singh ji, James, and Janet. We couldn't hear. We are waiting for her, of course. So I am back like a bad coin. I was there last time also, reciting my
Not a bad coin at all. You're the most welcome person on our panel.
pouring my poetry rather. So this is a humorous piece from my morning meanderings, and let me brag here a little. This was appreciated a lot, and people kept sending me messages, keep writing in the same refrain. So try Marlo, which means give it a try. So this is a humorous piece, as Rachna said just now, and it was published in learningandcreativity.com on May 11th, 2019. So just an extract from there. The newspapers had predicted a slight haze, and sure enough, it was quite hazy, and dust particles clung to the air with limp resilience, and the birds were unusually talkative. Oh, there he was again! Oh, there he was again! I did not know where to scurry for cover. Not exactly a stalker, not exactly a stalker, but that behemoth of a man had been relentlessly following me every morning, with his bellows, barrel, and a huge belly, all humongous ones. Madam, just a little bit of Hindi here. Madam, आप क्यों नहीं मानते? आजकल इतनी मिलावट है. मेरी भैंस का दूध बिल्कुल शुद्ध है. ले लो एक बार, ट्राई मार लो मैडम. पैकेज वाला दूध कितना बेकार होता है, जानते हो ना? Why don't you listen to me, madam? This is what he was saying. Why don't you listen to me, madam? These days, there is a lot of adulteration. Packet milk is full of impurities. Why don't you try this just once? This was the milkman saying. He was following me. He was following me with an orange colored milk can bellowing continuously. His motorbike standing outside the apartments that had newly sprung up in the vicinity. He was perhaps one of the last few vestiges of the milkman of yore who went from house to house on an ancient, ramshackle Rajdoot motorbike, in sync with the rattling milk cans, delivering milk to those customers who still continued to buy milk from them. Ek baat to try maar lo, please, madam. Try once at least. He again bellowed, this time with greater gusto, and I quickened my pace. A staunch believer in non-violence in every form, I was about to retort, Kumaru. I was about to retort, Kumaru, but reined in the salvo that sprang to my lips. Instead, I tried to look around for a rabbit hole. I tried to look around for a rabbit hole, but alas, there was none. Alas, there was none. Only a couple of manholes down which I had seen many an unsuspecting woman falling. With a happy shudder, I concluded that my girth would come to my rescue there. But this would definitely not solve the problem, would it? I had to escape the persuasive eloquence of this behemoth of a man selling buffalo milk. Ek baar to try Marlo, madam. Try just once. This was his third bellow, and my last ounce of patience dried up like a water drop on a hot plate. I turned back to out-bellow him, but in the heat of the moment, forgot that brusqueness had never been my forte. Just at that precise moment, from the corner of my eye, I noticed a buffalo looking balefully in my direction. Then, luckily, its eyes fell on the fat milkman with that orange milk can, and it lost its cool. It started running towards him full throttle. An animated cartoon gone berserk. The man with an agility belying his mammoth frame picked up the milk can and made a dash towards his motorbike, but not before he had flung one more threat at me. Madam, ek baar or try Marlo. We'll bring the milk tomorrow. Give it a try, he said. The neighbors did hear his fourth bellow. The neighbors did hear his fourth bellow, but I was safely inside the four walls of my house, safe from the intrusive power of bellows, bellies, and barrels. From my window, from my window, I sneaked a peek outside and almost thumped the air with a triumphant fist. The haze had gobbled him up. The haze had gobbled him up. Serves him right. I chuckled, with malice towards none but the tenacious milkman. He's still stalking me. He's still outside, He has caught me many an unsuspecting person. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that was really nice, Santosh. Thanks for bringing smiles to our faces with your vignette of that milkman with his tri-marlow bellow. So that was really interesting and very enjoyable.
Thank you. Thank you for bearing. Thank you for bearing with these bellows.
No. You lightened the atmosphere and
It's our
brought
pleasure.
smiles.
It's our
So
pleasure.
that's really wonderful. Okay, now we go to Janet. Can you hear me now, Janet?
Yes.
I think you need to
thank you.
unmute yourself. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay. I'm sorry. I was on, but not really on, so I apologize.
No, that's okay. No worries.
So first, Rachna, I want to thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here. And I want to dedicate my reading to my father's aunt, Teres Lerventhal, who was deported from her home in Hamburg, Germany, to the Riga ghetto in Latvia and shot in the Rumbala forest in December 1942. And this is taken from my chapter in a book called The Handbook of Psychoanalytic Holocaust Studies, International Perspectives. The language of loss. It was evening and it was morning. Those 2 days history records as Kristallnacht. 2 days and nights of Nazi government-sponsored rioting, looting, destruction, and murder. In a small village in Germany, my father hid, along with his parents, older sister, and younger brother, in the cellar of their home on November 9th, 1938. Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. It almost sounds poetic, but it was far from it. The next morning, my father was ordered to report to town hall. He was arrested, sent to Dachau. He was 16. In November 1942, my father's family was deported to Auschwitz and gassed upon arrival. My mother, also born in Germany, was 6 years old. In 1936, she was backed up against a wall at school. Her classmates threw rocks at her, beat her up, called her Jude, Jew, because she refused to say Heil Hitler. Her parents got her out to the Jewish girls' orphanage in Amsterdam, the Israelitisch Mädches Weeshuis. There were 104 girls, 4 survived. I've heard many stories, yet knew much could never be spoken. Poetry became the way to bridge the chasm between that which could be spoken and that which could not. Learning the craft of poetry, word choices, their connotations, music of the line, breath, line, and stanza breaks, and more, allowed me to write about that maze of twists and turns brought up by wrestling with the Holocaust, the Shoah in Hebrew. Trees are poems the earth writes upon the sky. We fell them down and turn them into paper that we may record our emptiness, wrote Khalil Gibran. Delving into the Shoah leaves us empty, bereft of humanity. How can it not? Poetry is the way I try to figure out the world and my place in it. Theodor Adorno, German philosopher, declared, "To write a poem after Auschwitz is barbaric." What I know as a poet writing about the Holocaust is that I am embarking on something difficult. I want to honor the victims, survivors, their descendants. I am wrestling with something of epic proportions, and I am working with and resigned to reality. I am a witness to history, and history is a weighty task. I believe we need to write after Auschwitz. It is not barbaric. I believe we must write about Auschwitz and all its implications, not only for the dead, but for the living. Survivors' lives were not easy. Many felt guilty for surviving. The living had dreams about the dead. That is what I write about. Survivors tried to shelter their children from their pain. They did not succeed. They had joy, though tinged by sadness. They loved, they lived, they died. That too is what I write about. Poetry after the Holocaust is necessary. The poet Paul Celan, who survived the Holocaust, said, "Only one thing remained reachable, close, and secure amid all losses: language. In spite of everything, it remained secure. But it had to go through its own lack of answers, through terrifying silence, through the thousand darknesses of murderous speech. The Holocaust brings up more questions than can ever be answered. Poetry asks questions, invites us in to look past that cursory reading, to dig deeper, to engage with the poem, and it wants us to look at the questions the poet poses, those that can be answered and those that remain unanswerable." Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet, for sharing this article. It was really touching, and at the same time, it was terrifying, you know.
Yes.
That period in history, the Hitler period, the Nazism, all of that. I mean, and that has been the source of
Yes.
a lot of what I call to myself the literature of pain.
Mhm. Yes. Yes.
Very somber.
Okay.
But it's needed. We need people to talk about it. We need people to articulate it.
Yes.
And of course, it warns us not to repeat our mistakes. I don't know whether we are going to be able to heed that warning or not. Definitely gives us it's a big red flag for everyone.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Jan.
everyone.
Thank you so much. I would now like to invite Rebecca Miller to read out a piece, Rooted in Hate. Just a quick introduction to Rebecca. Rebecca is a writer and an attorney living north of Boston. Her essays have been published in WBUR's Cognoscente and in the essay collection, Women Under Scrutiny. She says, "Before the serenity of being a writer, I worked as a prosecutor in southeastern Massachusetts, handling hundreds of child abuse cases." That must have been really tough, Rebecca.
Yeah.
So please, we're waiting to hear you. Rooted in Hate. Yeah.
Thank you. In 1973, when I was 9 years old, my mother made me invite the only Black girl in school to my birthday party. I hadn't included her because she wasn't my friend. At recess, the birthplace of all friendships in grade school, I played kickball against the boys and she galloped around the playground with the other horse-obsessed girls. My mother, a social worker by training and in her heart, was unimpressed by my reasoning and explained how it might feel to be the only Black family in our completely white town. At the time, I understood my mother was teaching me about compassion for others. As an adult, I realized that my mother was also demonstrating to me that a parent must instill these values in their children. Her children. Years later, when my son was in college in Philadelphia, a much more urban and diverse area than our small town north of Boston, he did an internship at a psychiatric hospital where he and the other white student interns were the minority. Miss Gale, a custodian at the hospital, would frequently ask the student interns for a ride home after public transportation had closed for the night. They always said no. A couple of weeks into the term, my son got a car and offered Miss Gale a ride home. From that evening on, he drove 30 minutes out of his way to take her home whenever they had the same shift. When he told me this story, he didn't mention that she was Black, though I assumed that she was. The refusal by the other students nagged at me, but I wanted to believe they were just self-absorbed college students. Then last summer, I was in a state park in rural Massachusetts, taking a break from a long drive. An American flag flew outside the park headquarters, and the familiar Smokey the Bear fire danger sign showed high risk after a summer of drought. Rangers were handing out maps to hikers, and a day-use area was busy with families unpacking coolers and lighting grills, except for the family that had staked out their space with a Confederate flag. 2 adults, 2 kids, eating lunch with a Confederate flag on a 5-foot pole beside their picnic table. These parents were also instilling their values in their children, maybe even teaching them to let a Black woman walk home in the middle of the night, serving their kids sandwiches and racism for lunch.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. And you're right. If we want the world to be a better place, we definitely need parents to instill the right values in their children, instead of, like you said, serving up sandwiches and racism. So that's again
most
a
definitely.
bit of a wake-up call for all of us, right? Isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Could I just say one thing about Janet's piece? If anyone,
Sure.
if anyone hasn't watched Ken Burns's documentary "U.S. and the Holocaust," it's unbelievable, and it's amazing and so informative. Maybe everybody's already seen it, but it just hearing her piece just brought that back again to me. So
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure we'd all love to watch it. And Janet, perhaps we could, have the link shared. I would love to share it on the Wise Owl magazine format.
I can send it. I have to be honest, Rebecca, I have not been able to watch it.
I can understand that.
Mostly because it would never change anything. And
Right.
but I know that it's an amazing documentary. I just have to watch it at the right time. But I'll definitely send the link.
If you could share the link, I could host it on our magazine.
Sure.
So that a lot of others could get to watch it,
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think
I would like.
the neat thing is that you have to usually be a member in order to watch it. It's public television, and so you would have to join, but people may want to.
You can do it. You can get us. I actually.
Yeah.
I've just been sick.
Okay.
I got a 7-day free membership,
Oh,
so you can just watch it for 7 days for free, and then cancel.
We'll work out the logistics. I'm sure something could be planned out.
It is definitely worth it. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So back to our session.
I wanted to
sure.
say.
James, you were saying something?
Just a short thing. I grew up in Southern Alabama when George Wallace was governor. And so of course, I moved away in about 1968, and the people then didn't understand the symbolism of the Confederate flag. To them, the Civil War was not about, it had nothing to do with slavery. It had everything to do with states' rights, and it's only been recently where we've come to terms with what the Confederate flag represents. But when I was a kid, it didn't have anything to do with what it actually represents. I just wanted to say that. And then I can remember black and white water fountains. So the Confederate flag needs to be put to bed.
Okay. So thanks for sharing your thoughts on that, James. We'll now move to our next writer, Pooja Singal from India. She'll be reading out a creative non-fiction piece called Frown. Pooja Singal is an assistant professor of English working for the government of Haryana in India. Her interests include reading, writing, blogging, and content creation. Her reading interests include women-oriented works, human relationships, and end-of-the-world literature. That's interesting. She shares her stories on Chronicles Crush, blogspot.com. So Pooja, please go ahead with your piece. We are all waiting to hear you. And incidentally, Pooja did a couple of articles for our anniversary edition, which touched upon social evils, and they were very well received, Pooja.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so go ahead, please.
So this one is a light-hearted piece. I mean, a short one. I hope you like it. It's about a frown, an innocent little frown. Some months back, I attended a conference on women empowerment at a university, which was a real eye-opener and taught me a lot of new things. Ironically, not about women empowerment alone, but about the need and benefits of wearing a frown. Yeah, you got it right. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true. Like it always happens at such events, I met some old forgotten friends and colleagues and also made some nice new acquaintances. During the tea break, I ran into a senior colleague of mine whom I was meeting after almost a decade. We exchanged pleasantries, but something was amiss. I kept observing her keenly for some moments, and by the time we finished our tea, I surmised that something was gravely wrong with her. I approached her, voiced my concern, to which she told me that she was perfectly okay. And now, even I could feel that she was actually fine. At the end of the day, we again had a chat. She admitted that her frown might be the culprit behind projecting her as unhappy or upset. But it was deliberate. She went on to enlighten me that smiling too much would make people take her for granted and also make her look commonplace. She said that she was too senior to smile at everyone. As if achievement was proportionate to frowning, the bigger the achievement, the deeper the frown. But I could make out that the depth of her frown was proportionate to her fear of being regarded as ordinary. So, just to stand out, she decided to wrinkle her forehead. This glory story of a frown suddenly seemed to rock the doctrine of benign affability of an ever-beaming person like me. But her candid admission of this tact of hers to gain importance helped me solve another mystery. I follow the social media posts of a stinking rich cousin of mine, happily married to a coal merchant for the last 10 years. Every time she posts a picture of a party, dressed in her most expensive gowns and diamonds, her frown is the first thing that catches my attention. I wish I could just edit her pictures, curve her tightly pursed lips into a smile, and erase the deep frown standing just between her beautifully threaded brows. Thanks to the wise colleague of mine, I can now see the reason why my rich cousin allows her crinkled forehead to mar the glow of her expensive facials. Such people, I guess, believe that being uptight helps them gain respect and importance. And what can be handier than a small self-made wrinkle on the forehead? Deep or shallow, on the forehead or in the eyebrows, on the nose or in the eyes, they feel that frown just makes them look classy. It makes them stand apart, pushes people away, makes them inaccessible, and earns the much-needed awe. But they need to consider smile as a more preferable option to look extraordinary. Of course, in a charming way. A frown helps you put on airs, but a smile just wins you hearts. And it helps you live happier and longer, as we all know. I believe that be it a beaming smile or just a grin, it does wonders with your face. It automatically brings a twinkle in the eyes and turns your aura magnetic and makes you look simply beautiful. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. A smile does wonders. And in fact, it's reminding me of William Blake's poem, The Smile. I don't know if you've read it. It used to be one of my favorites, And in that, he talks about the frown, and it went something like, and there is a frown of hate, and there is a frown of disdain, and there is a frown of frowns, which you strive to forget in vain. So definitely a big thumbs up for smiles vis-a-vis a frown.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me say something here.
Yeah.
Actually, there is no dearth of frowning glories here, Pooja. No dearth of frowning glories. You come across frowning
Absolutely.
They're so grumpy and forever frowning. Yeah, and it's so they look so intimidating. You just don't feel like approaching them. Because flaunt their frowns.
Yeah.
And it's so absurd, ridiculous. I just love to hear.
They are miserable and they make everyone around them miserable. So, yeah.
It's so much better to win people's love
Exactly.
Yes.
rather than respect, I think.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So we are heading to the close of the session. But before we close, I would like to read out a piece as well. And as far as I'm concerned, of course, you know me as the editor and curator of the Wise Out. And I'll just tell you a little bit more about myself. I have a doctorate in English literature. I've authored 4 books, namely Penny Panache, Myriad Musings, Financial Felicity, and the Bitcoin Saga. And my next book, Phoenix and Flames, which is a collection of short stories, should be hitting the bookstores sometime next year. I write regularly for national dailies in India, and I also review books for them. So I'm going to be reading out a short, humorous piece, actually. This is from my book, The Myriad Musings, and it is called The Rum Guzzlers. So let me just give you a context to it, why rum guzzlers. I've been an army child. So as an army child, I often ran into creatures of the wild that inhabited far-flung army stations. So when my dad was posted to the wilds of West Bengal, I ran into some magnificent beasts that guzzled rum. So that is the context of my piece. That is why rum guzzlers. So here goes. As an army child, I was quite accustomed to staying in never heard of places. One such place was Bengdubi in West Bengal. When my father was posted to Bengdubi, it did not even have its own train station. So we had to alight at Jalpaiguri and then make our way by road to Bengdubi. So we first arrived in Jalpaiguri one cold December morning and were ritually picked up at the station by an army captain and ushered into the ubiquitous one-ton, that's a small army truck, for our journey to Bengdubi. Soon we had left the small town of Jalpaiguri behind and were moving through a thickly forested area. As we moved through the forest, I thought I spied a huge gray hump behind a distant clump of bamboo trees. Seeing my interest, the captain accompanying us informed me that it was nothing but a rum guzzler. Seeing my total incomprehension, he twinkled. This is what we call elephants here, as they have a great fondness for rum and can smell it from miles away. My skeptical look elicited a complacent, "You will see," from the captain. In the bustle of shifting to a new place, I soon forgot this conversation. Then arrived the day when my father was to be formally dined in at the officers' mess. That is the tradition in the Indian Army. I'm sure it would be the tradition in other armies of the world also. So we were ushered into the dimly lit lawns as soon as we arrived. The bar was set out at the far end of the lawn. Suddenly, in the middle of the party bonhomie, I heard a shout, "Rum guzzlers aa gaye." The rum guzzlers are here. Before I could spy the gate crushers, the entire entourage, with practiced agility, retreated to the mess lounge and positioned themselves behind the bay windows. Intrigued, I squeezed myself into a crevice near one of the windows and peered outside. Nothing. And then I saw them as they materialized out of the dark. Them being 2 mammoth elephants walking through the gates of the officers' mess with a stately sway. As I watched, spellbound, the duo stopped lifted their trunks and delicately sniffed the air. They moved their heads as if in confirmation and purposefully headed towards the bar. Then, with an enviable delicacy, they curled their trunks around the bottles of rum on the bar counter and tapped them on the ground till the bottle broke and made a rum puddle. Using their trunks, they guzzled down the liquor and continued till the bar counter was empty of all bottles. Then they beat an unsteady retreat and disappeared into the darkness. That spectacle was something out of a Ripley's Believe It or Not. And that image of the rum guzzlers has stayed with me, and even after 3 decades, brings a reminiscent smile to my lips.
Oh, it was so great.
That was my little piece. I thought we should end on a slightly lighter note, you know.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much. So let's, I think, close the session. But I must say it was a very interesting session. We touched upon social ills, we touched upon history, we touched upon childhood, and we had the humorous piece, Try Marlowe. All of this added to the, you know, sort of mix of enjoyable pieces that we heard today. So thank you so much once again. Hope to see you soon again in other such sessions. I hope we're going to have many more of them.
Yeah.
And I'll end with our song. It says Hasta Manana till we meet again. Although Hasta Manana means meeting tomorrow, but I hope we're going to meet soon enough. So
Soon.
Hasta
Yes.
Manana till we meet again.
And I
Goodbye.
think to say, I'm sorry that I missed James and
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bringing us
yeah, I'm
together.
sorry. I
Thank
see you
you.
guys
Thank
online.
you. Thank you, Rachna, for such a
Thank
wonderful
you. Thank
evening.
you.
It's my pleasure.
Wonderful
Nice to meet
evening.
you, Rachna.
Yes.
Bye, Janet. Bye,
Okay.
Rebecca.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
James. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks, Lord. Bye. Bye-bye, Chitra.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 I'm keeping my frown in place.
Okay. Right. All right. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.